Hey everyone, I hope you're well, playing and are making the games that you all love. You're joining me here, your host, Max Pears, but not just me. A special guest has joined me. But we're here finally with the grandioso, the man with the plan, Evan Hill. How you doing, mate?
Good. I have no plans. I don't know why that was my intro. I feel like I need to come up with one now.
See, this is how well planned this is not, because I've just thrown you in the deep end.
I mean, it's worked out. I mostly just wing it all the time.
Secret to life, wing it.
Yeah, no, that's the big secret of level design. Don't have a plan, do it.
Oh, man, like, I think there's a humor and truth to that one, so fuck, man. But it's an absolute pleasure to have you here, mate, and like this, like I said, we've been chatting about this because we met back at E3 last year.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, had a couple of drinks, had a great talk in that, and, you know, time difference be damned, we're here now, so we've got it all set up. And for those listeners who may not know you, mate, do you want to give an introduction about who you are, my friend?
Yes, I definitely can. My name is Evan Hill. Most recently, I was a level designer on The Last of Us Part 2. Before that, I worked on an indie game called Solar Ash Kingdom, which is coming out eventually. And before that, I was a game designer on a game called Torment Tides of Numenera, which was a follow-up to Planescape Torment. So I kind of gravitate really heavily towards narrative-focused games and just games that make people feel bad and cry. And I really like doing that.
You're the life of the party, right, mate?
I mean, hey, that's what I just get all the negativity onto, like, you know, my games. I'm pretty fun in person, at least as far as people tell me.
Do they tell you that through the tears as well? It's like, yeah, great
this is just happy crying.
Hope to see you soon. No, man. So you've worked on a range of different projects then. And like you said, narrative is your big focus. And you just did, well, it's just come online about a few weeks ago of recording this episode of your talk where you talk about narrative and how it can be expressed in so many ways. And I really want to ask you about that. Like, what in this medium attracts you to narrative, I guess?
I think the biggest thing for me with games is that it's just so multifaceted. We were briefly talking before we started recording, is just the fact that with something like film or novels or comics, like there's a broad spectrum of expressivity. Like, you know, a Tarantino film and a Fincher film and a Miyazaki film are going to be just so fundamentally different. But at the end of the day, they're still like 90-ish minute linear stories told at 24 frames a second, meant to be consumed in a theater with a group environment. But with games, you can do that and also make something like Valorant or Gwent the card game, and they all still count as games, and they all still can take advantage of narrative design techniques. So you're given a bigger palette than any other medium by far. And I think it's always been just such a fascinating challenge to kind of boil story down to its most essential components so you can just apply it anywhere.
But first, let's have a quick word from today's sponsor. Today's sponsor is none other than me. What I've done, everyone, and I hope you're excited for this, is I've actually created a level design kind of store. What I've done in this store is put up different kinds of tips and tricks that you can find there, whether that be my actual ebook itself to that of level design pamphlets focused on different things such as traversal, stealth, breaking into the industry, as well as different talks that I have done which you cannot find anywhere else other than on this store. So if you are looking to improve on your level design skills and processes, then check out the Level Design Store, which will be down in the description below, where there'll be a link to find this. All you need to do is head over to gumroad.com/level design lobby. I hope you like what you see, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts. Thank you, And now back to the show.
Yeah, man, I think that's, like I say, it's such a fascinating one. You mentioned then about the 90 minutes, of films and how they tell it. I think it's such an, you said we spoke offline there and I'm stumbling on my words, so you can tell that I'm really smooth at this. But like you said, a lot of the techniques used in films are quite similar, whether it be cinematography, language of what's on the frame, what's not on the frame. But he's saying just the differences that you can use to tell stories with the different types of mechanics that are available to you is so vast that you don't always get a chance to learn everything. Or maybe, as you put when we were chatting before the podcast started, that you might even pick something up from a different genre and not even realize it and apply it to another game of a completely different genre, which is always just fascinating.
And like to me, those eureka moments are just some of the best, where you're transferring some direct or abstract experience that you had and saying it in a different way, or conveying it in a really unique or new fashion. So, and it's not even just related to games or genres. Like for me, one of my biggest inspirations during the development for Last of Us 2 was a Japanese film called Liz and the Bluebird. And it's just this... Oh,
dude,
yeah,
I want to ask you. Oh, mate, yes, I loved because it's the same director who did A Silent Voice, and it's on my to-watch list.
Yes.
And Silent Voice, by far, is one of my favorite films out there. So it's on my to-do list, Liz and the Bluebird.
It's better than A Silent Voice.
Oh, dude, you're setting up the hype now. My God.
No, it's like it became like my... It honestly just became my Bible during like making some of my sequences in Last of Us 2, because the director, Naoko Yamada, she has the strongest command over human body language I've ever seen out of any director in any medium, period. Like she can, you've seen it from A Silent Voice. For those listening, like she is able to convey a character's thoughts and emotions with their walk cycle from the knees down.
Oh my God, yeah. Oh, that is such a good point in that, mate, because it's so true. Because a lot of time you see it in Japanese medium, whether it be anime or their films. A lot of times they do focus on like the knees down or feet, but it doesn't really convey anything. But as you said, the way that she directs and positions those characters, it just tells you so much about their state of mind, their kind of overall body language. Are they close to or closed off from a person? Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you ever read, because I've got it. It's the Miyazaki books. It's part 1 and part 2. They're like a collection of interviews with him. And in the first book, he mentions how a walk cycle is the hardest thing to do. Yeah. And at first, I was confused by that, because I was like, wait, hold on. Like I learned how to do multiple walk cycles back at university. What's he referring to? And then, like you said, when you just stop and think about it, it's not about, in terms of the ease of technique of how to quickly set one up. It's about how do you display that. So fucking hell, man, great reference to that.
Yeah. And it's like there may or may not be a few swarms of bluebirds in Last of Us Part 2, because that's how far.
God, it break my heart now, man. I think after this, I'll have to go check it out. But it's been on it, because I knew she did it, and then obviously, sadly, the arson over Kyoto Annie, sorry, so. It just sounded amazing. But I think it's a follow-on to a TV show she did, because these two characters were in the original TV show, but were not the main focus, I believe. I could be wrong.
No, that's what I think. That's correct. It's an interesting case, because the TV show is an adaptation of a novel series, and this, though, is her own original spin-off of her own adaptation of the novel series. And there's a lot of other interesting tensions there too, because if you're familiar with the series, you know that its like main central focus is this intimate friendship between these two female characters. And the fascinating thing that's always been there is the author of the series is very strictly like, this is just friendship. There is no deeper layer at all. And the director, especially with this film, kind of directly calls bullshit on that.
Yeah, I'm excited, man. Like, silent voice to me was something I just learned so much from as well. And like you mentioned, it was the walk cycles, the what I liked about that film as well, and I'm sure they'll have reference to it, is not only the soundtrack, but the use of sound and how they distort it, how that shows communication and miscommunication. So yeah, so many elements that go into her work and what her team bring to those films is phenomenal.
Yeah, Kensuke Ushio especially. He. The other reason why Listen to Bluebird is even better is it's the same audio team, it's the same composition team, and like again for the listeners, like if you haven't seen A Silent Voice, it's about a deaf girl. So she has like hearing aids and other elements, and the soundscape of the movie incorporates things like the whine, like that high pitched whine of hearing equipment into not just the ambient sounds, but the music itself. Like it's actually used as an instrument in certain scenes, and it'll destroy you.
Oh, dude, it breaks my heart every time. I'm like, need to watch it, but goddamn, here come the feels. And that the song Lit brackets Var, the ending one where like it all comes together is like, I don't think there's ever been a song which has made me just go, that just hammered home the import, like that whole scene put together, accompanied by that song is just mind blowing. Truly, like,
because
hit
they
you right
actually,
in the feels.
Yeah, it just shows how technically proficient they are. Because that piece of music is used throughout the entire film, but only at that very climactic moment does it crescendo like that. And fuck. And so that team went on to do Liz and the Bluebird, which is even more subtle and elegant and impactful. Like the simplest way to sell this movie to anybody who is totally unfamiliar with this creator's work is the second scene of the film is just two characters silently walking through a high school up to a music room. But again, their walk cycles, their body language, how they look at and interact with each other and the environment around them becomes the centerpiece, to the point where their footfalls, which are like slightly out of sync with each other, are used as the grounding element of the soundtrack.
All right, dude, you sold it to me. Like, cancel this. We're done. I got stuff to do now.
This is an anime review podcast. We're going to meet back in 2 hours.
I find that hilarious. This has evolved into that, but it's brilliant. So I was going to say then, mate, I guess without spoiling the film to little old me, what did you take away? Because you mentioned that you used it as inspiration and took a lot from it. What do you feel was your biggest takeaways, and how did you apply it to this medium?
Yeah, the two biggest things was like hitting that tone of I can't even really put words to it other than the fact that it's like I put it in the video game, but more just this like sublime comfort, this sublime like element of being with somebody that you care about, and just having that kind of perfect connection. Not, romantic necessarily. In Liz and the Bluebird, it's kind of framed that way, but peaceful beauty, I think, is like the simplest way to put it. Like trying to collect that and deliver that in linear action game, especially as one as violent as Last of Us 2, was kind of like one of my central goals with one of my scenes. And then in addition to that, where my role kind of evolved was I also then became really, really involved with our dialogue and body language pipelines. So quite literally, I took a lot of what I learned of Naoko Yamada's use of body language and just directly applied it to our techniques and our process at Naughty Dog. So yeah, so thankfully there's now like a lot of sequences, and mind you, this is all like hand scripted gameplay, walk and talk. We're not just talking cinematics, where I try to capture that interplay between a person speaking and the listener's body language. Asking a tough question and seeing the listener like tense up or rub their neck or stop, turn, look, turn away, like just kind of digging into that silent interplay to kind of show what the character's thinking internally beyond just, oh my God, I think we're going to die. And I'm afraid that zombies are going to need bullets in them soon.
The classics.
Yeah. And I mean, like, thankfully, like our writing team is our writing team, and we had so much to work with. So it's like, yeah, like those are the two main takeaways. Is like both like the trying to recreate and like hone in on a particular tone for some very particular scenes, and then more generally, just analyzing how she conveys body language. So like some of the biggest things that I always go back to now are just like simple rules of thumb, where it's like when you're doing scenes like this where you have somebody talking and somebody reacting, you don't want to just chop it up on the scenes where it's like character says something, then this character over here says something and does something else. Like you want this interplay where as someone is speaking, you're seeing how each individual word is hitting the listener.
Yeah.
And like, you're having them like wind up or otherwise kind of flow through a conversation so that it doesn't just feel like what it is, these chopped up lines in a sound booth where it's like A, B, A, B. Instead, you're, as A's going on, you're having B do something subtle, or A shifting halfway through the sentence, or, some kind of interplay where it's showing that everybody's alive at the same moment. And like once we kind of built in a lot of those techniques and kind of did a pass, like the game really started to pop more and more. And I think, yeah, you'll see it soon enough.
Awesome, man. No, that sounds just fascinating to me on the sense of like, I'm sure it's fascinating for everyone else as well. But just to hear how your focus, when you're a level designer, there's obviously so much different sort of elements coming to play at one point. And to hear your kind of focus, you're kind of on certain different elements, like the downbeats we've spoken about here, and I guess with conversations, and to hear how you think about bringing more emphasis to them, bringing more impact and engagement through it, I think is just really fascinating, mate. Honestly, I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's been a unique opportunity too, because it's like there's just like I can't, beyond just the stylistic barriers, like the technical barriers to do, particularly this body language stuff that I've been talking about. Just like there wasn't anything that could reasonably do this. Like Naughty Dog pushed through like the tools finally. Like this is all like a result of motion matching and a bunch of just straight up innovation and the fact that this is The Last of Us and we have really strong characters that can actually go through all of these complex internal machinations that I can then render on screen, where it's like it'd be a little more difficult if it was a much more traditional game, or if it was a much more traditional story game, for example, where it's like for something like with CD Projekt Red, like the scope and scale that you guys need to operate on, like these conversations normally wouldn't get the level of detail that we were allowed to go into. And so it's like it felt like this really weird confluence, and I wasn't always setting out to do this exact style of narrative design, but heck, man, like I don't want to stop now.
Well, I was going to say, man, because like I watched your talk that you recently posted, like I said, a few weeks back online, and I guess I want to know, like, what was it that attracted you mostly to these kind of more narrative moments, these narrative games? Was there something that just caught your eye or inspired you to get to this?
I think my deepest inspiration, honestly, was Alan Moore's Watchmen. Like way back in high school, I was like kind of just on track at the time to just pursue a career in physics.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was like AP Physics, AP Lit. And then I came across Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud. And that
great
was kind
book.
of it. Yeah, that was just kind of it. It was like, oh, if comics, why not video games?
Yeah.
Also, then I picked up Watchmen, and that was kind of the point where it's like, well, I'm not going to make a comic better than this ever. I'm not going to do comics. No thanks.
That's always the funniest bit, because you find you're inspired by it, but at the same time you're just like, so disheartened because someone's just done it so well. You're just like, fuck. So yeah, no, I get that feeling. I was gonna say then, mate. So for any of the the listeners and that who I guess have the craving for narrative with level design as well, is there any like tips that you would offer for them to think about or focus on?
Both in terms of like looking for good narrative design and like trying to enact it. I think to me, and like my talk kind of goes over this, like the most distilled element I can pull from any formal this is how to write stories content or lectures or formalism is change and surprise. Like it's there's just something innately human about reacting to change and being changed, and whether that's a material situational change, like hey, the building you're in is collapsing, or a social or internal change, like whether or not you feel you can trust somebody after they reveal a piece of information, or and once you kind of see that like the core of narrative is change, you can see that the all of these principles expand well beyond just stories with beginning, middles, and ends, or cutscenes, or even text. Like what we're talking about is that a lot of games can just innately generate narrative. So, like as we were kind of talking about previously, like things like Valorant or card games, they're essentially engines for stories when you frame it this way. Your like Magic the Gathering is usually a simple repetitive story, so is League of Legends, but they're interesting because they're still compelling. Like you have this state of the early game where everything's new and fresh and the tempo of the game is lower and it always escalates, changes. Your strategy is normally what you want to enact to surprise or challenge your opponent. And it's like all of these games are basically a story of a system destabilizing. And you're just able to use the same kind of instincts that you would in making a good card game to making a good story. In my experience, like there's just this innate quality where it becomes less about like, oh, how do I make a good scene, as more how can I fuck with my audience. Like it just really centers it to me where I think is like the most useful place to think about not just narrative design but design in general, which is just the person playing, the psychology of your audience. And in the same way that like telling a good joke is there's no core formula. I can't give you a class on comedy and expect you to handle it or to then like go out and beat most stand-ups. It's because people are like the literally most complex thing on the planet, and there's a lot of them, and they're really weird and they're really different from each other. So the only thing you can really do is just try and continually climb this infinite mountain of like connecting with people. But the really heartening thing is, well, it might sound like this should be impossible. It's really not. Like you can actually connect with a lot of people using just empathy and a lot of elbow grease.
A lot of the elbow grease in this industry, hey?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, a lot of it. Yeah, like a lot of it.
Yeah, but man, I think that's so what you said there about like the empathy and there's so many different people, but you're right, is that although people are complex and there are so many of us with different life experiences, it is amazing how we do all connect, or a large group of people connect with A and others with B and so on with C, and just how you can reach with it. So I think that's such a great perspective to look at it, mate. That's really fascinating stuff there, man.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, like I've been just learning over the years, is there's some great talks I can link to this effect too, where it's like the broadness of humans in general is really more of an advantage than a disadvantage. It's that like everybody's just so wildly different, but there's so many of us that you can pretty reasonably like make anything work. Like there is reasonably an audience for your exact type of strange ass game. And it's really more about making it easy to like and easy to find than necessarily picking the right feelings or picking the right emotions. Like, on paper, Dark Souls just was so far away from like the emotional experiences of most other mainstream games that it just seemed like it wasn't going to work. But it hit that set of emotions so intensely and perfectly, and actually, even though it's really hard, really accessibly, because even though Dark Souls is really hard, you get to feel what Dark Souls is like immediately.
Got my ass kicked too many times.
Yeah. You get access to the emotion that makes Dark Souls immediately. And like, to me, that's what accessibility really means. It's not just a matter of like, oh, how easy is this game to excel at? It's how easy can I access what's most interesting about this game?
See, that's
and
such
like,
a...
with Dark Souls...
sorry, you go first. Sorry, man, I interrupted.
Well, it's like, because the line in the sand I would like to draw is like, with Dark Souls, you play Dark Souls, you turn a corner, you get mauled, you still don't have any idea what's going on. Like, everything in the prison gives you a sense of the emotional trauma and struggle that is Dark Souls. And like, it just basically looks at you and says like, the whole game will be like this. And then for a lot of people, they'll look at it and say, cool, I'm done. But for anybody else, for anyone else who struggles through it, kills the demon, feels like a badass, they're hooked. They've gotten the full like emotional core. The contrast would be something like Street Fighter or like high-level Counter-Strike, where with these like high-level, less accessible games, the real meat that people love about it is that like complex, high-speed strategy game against an equal opponent when all of you know what the other knows and just understand all of the dimensions of the game, and you're just, fucking anime fighting each other in some fifth-dimensional chess game. But you don't really get to see that until you've like spent a couple dozen hours with this game.
Yep.
And it's like there's better onboarding, there's better things, there's designing a game so that those middle portions have slightly different flavors and aesthetics. I think that's where Super Smash Brothers really succeeded, is like, it's still fun when you have no idea what you're doing.
At Level Design Lobby, we believe everybody has a story to tell. Hobbyist or student, freelancer or veteran, we made it our mission to unite those who share our passion for creating and developing great games. Thanks to our generous Patreon backers, we've been able to do just that. So if you've already pledged your support, thank you. If not, you too can ensure the future of Level Design Lobby, helping us to create even more exciting content, collaborations, interviews, and much more. With awesome perks and rewards, whether you're a seasoned professional or just getting started, you're sure to find something for you. Want to share tips, tricks, and advice with passionate, like-minded developers? Our awesome community Discord has you covered. Fancy practicing your level design, creating strong portfolio content, and having fun? Then try our level design weekends. Or perhaps you want to individually discuss your work, hone your skills, or level up your career? Then consider our one-on-one mentorships. If you share our vision, then go to patreon.com/Level Design Lobby for more information and to pledge your support. Thank you.
I was going to say, mate, I think that's something that you touched on, because like recently I've been playing games, and I know some I'll never complete, just sadly the way of life. But one of the things that's been putting me off games more and more recently is their tutorials. And I think you hit the nail on the head with the whole, like, you get the core, what is the experience of Dark Souls versus most games where it's like, this is run, this is jump. Just because, and I say that on the fact that I'm a gamer, so I understand that stuff. They're doing it to help reach out to new audiences with any game, and it makes sense. But I do think you're right, though, is like, just because we have tutorials doesn't mean that we should shy away from what is the actual essential core of the game. So I think you've put that very well, mate.
Yeah, like a simple way to expand on it is like, if you're doing a tutorial and your game has running, give me a reason to run.
Yeah.
Is your game about running away from very scary things? Well, guess perfect time for that.
Fucking bang on, man. Bang on. Yeah, it's I think it just goes back to what we were chatting about even offline and at the beginning of this is there's so many ways to tell these narratives in different shapes and forms of mechanics and technology that we have. And, when VR came out and everyone was raving about it, I thought it was very fascinating that everyone was excited to go into this new frontier. And me personally, I was just like, we haven't even mastered this frontier, let alone adding the element of VR, which is its own, crazy kookiness and amazing different elements they've got. Augmented reality has their own stuff there. Like we had, I made an augmented reality game in the past and figuring out that. But like we're saying, there's so many elements to design. And like I said, there's been some great games that's come out throughout the entire time period and everything. But like I said, man, I feel like we've got so much to still learn, figure out. And I think the other thing that makes me slightly sad about it is the fact that you mentioned the quirkiness and kookiness of different games for different people and all that, is how much goes into a game that compared to, and I'm not taking away from any other art form, because to write a book, to create an album, to direct a film, to act in a film, they're all different skills, right? All completely, again, different crafts. I just think when you've got a game, there's either more elements and less control that, again, like it's a shame that it isn't easier in a sense to make games so we can experiment more in a way.
Yeah. I mean, like it's like, yeah, with not detracting from other mediums, it's, to me, the clearest differentiation is that there is no such thing as a uniform game production in the way that like film and TV can do it, where it's like films are such films and every film is fundamentally the same. You need cameras, you need actors, you need lights, you need all of these elements that it's able to be distilled down to like a factory line. You have unions and all of these other core elements where it's like you understand like what a film needs and how it needs to be made and who you need to make it pretty much offhand, like by muscle memory for some people. For a game, sometimes you might need actors and sometimes you might not. Sometimes you might need engineers. Sometimes you might not. Sometimes you might need blood artists. Others you don't. And like the scope and variability, like the variability even more than like the broadness, is I think the thing that makes it such a intense thing to experiment in game design, because you might end up needing a specialist in a skill set that isn't even related to games yet. Like, if you make a claymation game, like who do you find for that? Like you're always not just pushing the bounds of like the technical skills or internal skills required, or even just the kind of, empathetic or narrative skills we're talking about, but just straight up like you need to build a team that can build your game.
Yeah.
And your team is not going to look like any other team that may have ever existed for any game.
Oh yeah.
And like that to me is like the biggest logistical challenge with games. Like there's some benefits that we have as a result, where it's like most games don't require the same kind of material logistics that a film company does, where you literally need the capital to like rent space, coordinate everybody to be in the same place, working 12 hours a day for like 8 weeks remotely in New Zealand, for example. But yeah, it's double-edged sword when it's like when everything is just manpower and time. That's I think where a lot of crunch culture. Yep.
And elbow grease, as we said. Yeah.
It's kind of the root cause, I think, a lot of habits that have proven to be difficult.
Well, I think it's also, I think it's a fair few things, because I mean, you and I won't solve crunch over this podcast by any stretch of the imagination, but it's always interesting hearing another person's opinion, because I think there's so many factors, right? There's so many to think about and discuss, because it's a multifaceted problem. And one of the what you mentioned about building a team, right? The other thing is when you build a team that's huge, like the places that you and I are working at, and sometimes places are even bigger, is making sure everyone's vision of that game is the same, because it's not even necessarily when you design a game through the initial pitch to prototype. That doesn't stay the same, as we both know. That's going to change. You're going to discover new stuff because someone's going to experiment, or maybe the ideas you had on paper do not translate to game. And that's the other element that comes to it is, did you read that Creative Inc.
Creativity
on
Inc. was
Pixar?
great. And I think, and yeah, like it wasn't ever explicitly stated, but like I think kind of the thing we're talking around is just that, like, how impactful collaboration is. That often, like, both in my experience and watching other really capable directors just kind of work in this space, it's not something you can micromanage. It's not something you can fully sketch out and expect to execute exactly as you wanted to, because like that would suck. Like that would not be the best version of the game. I think like my favorite thing being at Naughty Dog was the like working on the project was the collaboration, was the literal fact that because I was coordinating with all the departments because we were our own producers, that if I didn't have the answer to something in terms of like how to articulate the vision, I would be able to ask my artists or my animators, and not just ask them to solve it, but help them inject what they saw as valuable to the experience. So it was like giving them the canvas to make it their own was always just like the best strategy. And you saw it reflected in the way the upper directors handled it, where it's like Neil, for a lot of sequences, your initial start is just like a couple of paragraphs. Like he's able to distill it down. He'll sketch it out. Like the character starts emotionally here and needs to end over here. Can you do that? Give me something that does this. Break them.
And you're just like, yes, finally, the tears are coming.
And then it's like, here's a version of that. And then we look at it and they say, it's like, not eyes are dry. All right, do it again. And then 20 more times later, after you've kind of attuned with art, animation, sound, concepts, effects, like it just gets the snowball rolling where, you're using your team's brain more than you're trying to just be the biggest, coolest, most amazing artist in the room.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's such a fantastic point, mate. Is not only is iteration important, as you mentioned then, like that's such a key element of making video games, but also how you work together as a team is so, like, not even as we're just saying like on a company scale, but on the scale of just for that mission, maybe just for that section. How do you guys communicate? How do you guys make sure that you've got the freedom to do your thing, the freedom to do mine? How do we all put that together? I think is always its own challenge, but gives the best results.
Like there's definitely sequences that I worked on in Last of Us that I don't think could have been like even a quarter as impactful if it wasn't for the specific artists and animators that I had. Like, just not necessarily saying they're like, oh, they're that much of a virtuoso, because they definitely are. But it was just that they were able to relate to the emotional experience we were going for in a very concrete way, and then it was able to come out. It was able to become what it needed to be in a way that, like, if me or Neil or anybody else in the chain had like forcibly dictated what it was supposed to be, we wouldn't have gotten the result we got.
Yeah. No, that's awesome, mate. Now I'm looking at the time, and I know that Valorant is just released at the time that we're recording this, and I know you're dying to get on it, brother. So, like, I don't know, is there any like other last things you want to say before we wrap up, mate?
I don't know. I mean, Valorant's very good. I'd be able to talk about like that, because I think that might be an interesting contrast point, because we've been talking about narrative and all of this like single player design, and then like Valorant is just this like hyper focused, super competitive, punishing game, and it kind of outlines to me like what is universal to so much design. Like kind of going back to the Dark Souls thing, like Valorant shows you exactly the type of fucking game it is right off the bat. You have a pixel of your head exposed. Somebody is gonna blow you up. You're gonna feel that sting and that sense that this was 100% just your fault.
Yeah, it's interesting that they went down that road, because also when you look at the character variations, people compare it to Overwatch in terms of their abilities. But as you're saying, on the more difficulties side, it goes towards more, like you say, just one kind of mistake on your end is the be all or end all of your
I think
run.
like that's the most compelling thing to me. Is like it's clear that despite it taking design elements from Overwatch or other hero shooters, it is a spiritual successor to Counter-Strike through and through, not just in its movement mechanics, but in that core ethos of skill and discipline being the central tenet. Like, as opposed to something like Call of Duty, where the map design is just there to facilitate people moving around like monkeys. Like literally, like Call of Duty maps are playgrounds that just cycle you around and make you collide with other people. Valorant maps are these like deeply tactical affairs where a single piece of cover determines your entire strategy. Like the fact that this box is half height versus full cover, I'm going to pick a different weapon and use a different character on this.
No, it's fascinating because I haven't had a chance to play it yet. I will be giving it a whirl, but I've only just seen streamers play it and stuff. And the strategy and some of the powers that help to more open spaces. You've got that character that places down that mist to help, like, again, reduce line of sight, so you can either get away or use it to your advantage.
Yeah, and it's like they kept the hero design, I think, really grounded, which is just makes it so much more paradoxically impactful. Like with Overwatch, it's everybody is the big hero of their own movie, and they could they could solo everybody on a good day. And then in Valorant, it's like, cool, this guy can drop smoke bombs and occasionally make a big explosion, but other than that, he's just a dude. Don't let him die.
No, I think, again, we were just chatting off air how Riot seemed to, I don't even know how to phrase it more than, I'd love to know their strategy and how they create, because these games, and we talked about how they just released a card game as well, and that got really high scores in terms of reviews. How their design process for it all comes about when they're doing it. It's fascinating.
I've actually heard a fair deal of how they tend to approach things, and it's fairly compelling in that, like, I so vehemently disagree with it. and it mainly works for what they're trying to do. Like the biggest thing, like Riot designers will talk about, is their use of frameworks, which basically boils down to like kind of needing the game design equivalent of showing your work on a math test, like needing a really strict, almost academic justification for any design decision you put forward. And so, like, as a result, the path of least resistance tends to be proven designs. So being able to, like, more quantitatively look at, say, Counter-Strike and say, well, here are all the elements of Counter-Strike. Here are elements that work and here are elements that don't. Let's remove the elements that don't. So, like, it seems to be a very effective process for distilling existing designs down. But I can see, and from, talking internally, like, it runs into trouble generating new designs. So it's less good at coming up with wild new ideas or solving problems that nobody was expecting to have, which is what often is the case in single player games, versus kind of it's like the difference between doing a new model of car versus building an all-terrain vehicle before you even know the plan or where you're trying to get. and it's very like different. I think it will continue to serve them extremely well, because they're such a big organization. game design is already difficult enough to articulate, much less the pure multiplayer style that they work off of, that kind of having this much more rigid approach, I think is the right call for their style. I think they could, for some of their more experimental stuff, like loosening it up will probably become more and more like required and impactful. But at first I was honestly kind of lukewarm on Valorant, and that completely dissipated just because of the like sheer depth and kind of quality of their execution. Like there's just too much to ignore. And like, to me personally, like some of their character writing, some of their character designs, they're a little on the weaker side. I think they could, there's some easy fixes there. Some of their maps feel early and blocky, but already with the 4th map they're releasing today, like literally today, it shows that they were aware of some of the shortcomings of the other designs. They've already been pushing past them internally. I think this is even more than the card game, like the first demonstration that Riot is a serious design house and not just the League of Legends place.
Yeah, and I think this is what this game, they're very much, their status was riding on this game. So to see where they move forward, especially with the esports scene as well, because they're obviously very well known for that with League of Legends.
Yeah, I think
it'll be even more fascinating.
That was the other part that like kind of that really showed me how seriously good these guys are. Honestly, like the esports structuring, like I follow a lot of like marketers, influencers in the space. Like there's this guy called Devin Nash who like breaks down the economics, the logistics, and the like general business of esports and also content creation online. And he'd been going on for like a solid year because he actually used to run like Cloud9, I believe.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, no, like he actually has run teams. He has run like esports leagues and like professionally made his money off of like working in esports. But he'd always talk to the fact that like, well, Counter-Strike was like one of the best esports. It was never able to get any realistic sponsors, that he'd been in the room with like Fortune 500 companies and like watched them just lose all interest the second they figured out that the video game they wanted to sponsor would like half the time at the end of a match go, "Terrorists win. Eat Burger King." And they're just like, "Nope, bye. Sorry, we're gone. No, it's not happening."
Yeah.
And so just even the small choices like for Valorant to like kind of subtly sanitize itself, like there's no bomb, it's the spike. There's only attackers and defenders. They very deliberately and I think successfully made it like sanitized in a necessary way, not in a kind of like, oh, they had to censor themselves. It's like, no, they rode this line perfectly. There's a big explosion at the end, but because they didn't call it a bomb, it's okay. They literally using assault rifles, but hey, the blood's mostly turned off and there are no bodies if you don't want there to be. Come on, Forever 21, please market yourself on our shooter game.
Yeah, that's such an amazing point. Just the phrasing of it can have such an impact on that space, because I don't know much about it. I follow a few things. I used to follow the Overwatch League, London Spitfires, baby, as well as just following Rainbow Six, because I think Rainbow Six Siege is a very well done game.
Absolutely.
And yeah, just to think about that is just different elements that you may not always perceive, I think is fascinating. You'll have to send me his Twitter or his YouTube.
Yeah, he's a really fascinating guy, and it's like even beyond that, like even just structurally, like what Valorant is doing is going to succeed. I think it's from the bottom up, so it's like grassroots. They're not. Yeah. There's no overarching structure like with how the Overwatch League was attempted to be handled, which has like proven to be a less successful methodology. Where they're just like, you gotta buy franchise teams off of us. You have to do this. It's just going to be all ad hoc. They're going to support what works. They're not going to support what doesn't work. And it just shows that Riot is actually really fucking serious about this game. And I think just the raw confidence of that is like a selling point.
Yeah, man. I think it's also just interesting how, like you're saying, because esports is still such a new frontier in many ways, despite it being popular. Some of the most famous players obviously making a ton of money, as well as others making a living being, say, like commentators for it, and all these other people setting up arenas for this. There's a lot that goes behind the scenes to it. So to see these guys who again have a great understanding from League of Legends is, yeah, I'm sure, like you said, it is something that they will plan out, and I'm sure everyone will be making some good amount of money from it, and the design choices seem to back that up. So yeah.
Now to kind of tie this up in a bow, bring it full circle, like the real compelling thing is going to be how the narrative shakes out, because the real like secret of esports is the narrative design doesn't really happen in game. It's about the sports commentary. It's about like giving an experience or a tournament, or like facilitating those types of moments, those types of personal stories where, like if you know Counter-Strike, about Simple, this little fucking madman who will do things like chuck the most expensive gun in the game over a wall to distract an opponent and then use his pistol to finish him off.
I saw that. That was so crazy.
And it's like, you're giving, as a designer, as a designer of a game like that, you're not planning on it. You're giving your players, your commentators, your community the tools to tell their own stories, to come up with these like wild experiences that like you can't plan for. You just try and create this critical mass of potential, of just enough weird things or compelling elements that enough people will want to sit and play it long enough that you'll have these iconic moments that you'll eventually just, you'll have a world kind of crop up around your game.
Yeah, I also find that fascinating because you mentioned that, and I'm a big fan of MMA and boxing. A lot of the times, some of the things that sell the fights are the stories, leading into the fights. And I always find that fascinating, and how we're going to see esports players eventually come on, because there's always a transcendent star in every sport. There always is. The most recent one right now is Conor McGregor in MMA. And right now you can tell that the stars who play are very much part of the internet culture, the memes, all of that, the way that they talk, body language. It's all internet culture, right? It's so that. And I'm going to be fascinated to see when that breakout star comes. You say that we tell stories, in the game so that commentators can make that. But when we actually get that star who is a player who dresses nicely, doesn't just say "get good" or reference memes, but is elegant in their words as well to appeal mainstream, that's when I'm going to find that fascinating, because that's another story element that you mentioned on top of all of these.
Oh yeah, I think another, and like one could argue it's like we're starting to get there. Like Ninja's very clean. He's kind of like building the leg. He doesn't have the strength of like say an internet donkey in terms of personality. But like, because it's like I'd want to add to your frame. It's like I want somebody in a suit who's nice and approachable and as entertaining and edgy as Donkey can be.
He's brilliant. He's brilliant too.
Who could like go on like a late night show and just like own the room by being funny.
Yes. Yeah.
But like, yeah, the other thing that I'm still surprised nobody's done, and like it just needs the organization and the right game to do it, is like there's I think a gaping hole in the market for a WWE of esports. Like if you had a battle royale game with like 30 or 40 players, but instead of it just running tournaments, you got the same roster of 30 or 40 players and then had scripted like seasons of matches where they're doing like these performances and all of these things. Like you could, I think, break down and outdo most esports if it's just like this you can have 40 streams going at once, but they're all like scripted and like it's decided who's going to win. There's reveals and turns and, you know, heroes and villains and people who are cheating, and like becomes this whole like, I don't know why we haven't done that yet. I think maybe it's like having a game for it is going to be the right thing, but
I was going to say, have you seen that role-playing GTA 5? It's not bang on what you're saying, but it's close to it.
It's getting there.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's fascinating to watch too. Because also I was watching someone who was like a petty crime getaway driver. But as soon as he went and took out mechanics because they painted his car wrong.
Oh, wait, I did see this was his General Sam?
Yeah,
oh my God.
That's it. And that video is firstly hilarious, and I love how they keep trying to sing the Drive song, a real human being. I loved that bit. But the thing that broke it was as soon as he did it, he shot the mechanic, and they're like, because in a way, that isn't what his character, or I didn't feel what his character was about. Like, he was about doing petty crimes, not trying to assassinate mechanics for painting his car wrong. But it's still funny. Just it'll be fascinating to see if that goes there.
I think it's getting there. Some of this also happens in like Minecraft, where it's like these private servers that people kind of build stories out of in seasons. But it's like, I think once it like merges with like the ninja style commentators, where they like you get this, you know, the force of personality with the high stakes, with the like action, it'll, one of you people listening, just do this, please. I want to watch this so badly.
Yeah, just give us a bit of money on the side. Yeah, we don't ask for much, just a little, just a few mil. You know, consider it, you know, our gift to you. Just pay us back, guys. That's all we ask. But all right then, mate, I'll let you get going because we've talked about anime, games, the future of esports, and much more, man. So just again, thank you so much for coming on this show, mate. It's been such a great episode. I've learned a lot from listening to you, and just thank you for coming on, mate.
No, of course. This discussion's been great. It's nice to just kind of sit down and just shoot the shit about design. Like, I'm can't wait to hear what you think of Liz and the Bluebird, honestly. It's, especially if you like silent voice, it's going to be...
You're going to be the first to know. You're going to be the first to know. Trust me. When I finish that, I'm coming for you. So I'm excited. I will have it watched by the end of this week. That is for sure, man. So if anyone wants to reach you though, mate, how can they do so?
Easiest way is Twitter. You can find me at ehillgamedesign. Probably linked around where you're listening to this. And my DMs should be open. If you ever have any questions about design or breaking into the industry or anything else like that, just hit me up. I've got some time right now as I'm waiting for this video game to happen.
Awesome, mate. So do get in contact with him. There'll be a link to all of his stuff down in the description below. I'll also get that video talk that you did as well, mate. I'll put that in the description. Fantastic. And we should discuss narrative even more so in this. So thank you everyone for listening, and if you do want to get in contact with me, you can do so on Twitter at MaxPairs or email into the show at Level Design Lobby. And if you want to support the show, please head on over to patreon.com/Level Design Lobby. Take it easy everyone, and we'll catch you all next time.